province of KwaZulu-Natal, the tourism sector. With us today, we've got experts within the tourism industry who will be taking us through some of the work that they have done in the last few days. And this work has been through the Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs through the leadership of our MEC Nomusa Dube-Ncube, who will be joining us as part of this panel a little bit later, just to outline her thinking behind this. What we have seen is that the coronavirus crisis has really hit us in the last few weeks. We've seen, and we will be witnessing, even more increased poverty levels within our country. People have lost already their source of income, and they will continue to lose their income. We have seen, particularly in the tourism sector, which is the sector that we're focusing on today, a decline, obviously, in terms of visitors to our countries. Our hotels have really hit a serious knock. Our tourism industry have suffered greatly. Several sectors have also that support the tourism sector have also seriously been impacted by this pandemic. Our MEC has led us to a process of putting together work streams within the government, and those work streams really are to formulate actionable short, medium, and long-term plans to address this economic impact caused by COVID-19. And the crisis that we are anticipating will hit us even more post the lockdown, and once we are at level 1. We need to, as part of this process, is really to set up a panel of experts, part of a think tank that will analyze the potential sector impact of the COVID crisis, identify sectoral opportunities and interventions, which is what we are hoping to hear today, or which we will hear today from a panel of experts, and identify a set of policy interventions really that will come in to assist this tourism sector, which has been hit hard by the COVID-19. This panel has really taken into account the macro and the microeconomic impact of the sector in KwaZulu-Natal. And part of their plan is really to look at how we put together recovery plans for our sector, and how the tourism sector can really come out of the serious crisis. This is a think tank. It's about sharing information and also listening. And we will be taking on a lot of the questions that will come through the Q&A session. And a lot of those we will then put forward to our panelists today. Just to introduce our panel members, we have Ms. Bernadette Gallivia, who from BDO, who has joined us. Good morning, Bernadette. And we have Ms. Cindy Lekulu from BBAS, Basadi in Tourism. Good morning. And we have Graham Watson from Thompson Africa, who has also joined us. We have also, as part of this team, other panel members such as Joe Wyatt from Catalyst, Russell Curtis from Edtea Municipality, Invest Durban, and as well as Charles Pierce from FIDHASA, who have really participated and assisted in crafting a lot of the inputs that have come through what we're going to be seeing this morning. Without any further ado, also just to indicate as per my introductory remarks that we are also expecting our Honorable MEC Nomusa Dube-Ncube, who will be participating as part of this panel. This panel has been supported by Tourism KwaZulu-Natal, a team from Tourism KwaZulu-Natal, and our mother department, Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. And part of this plan has really been facilitated through the DDG, acting DDG for Industry Development, Ms. Fikiswa Pupuma, as well as the acting HOD, Mr. Sihle Mkhize, just to acknowledge the workroom behind the scenes. Without any further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Bernadette Gallivia, who will then take us through the first presentation. Good morning, Bernadette. The platform is yours.
Good morning to everybody watching, and thank you for that introduction, Neville. I'm just going to switch my screen so that you can view the presentation, if you would just bear with me for a moment. So my job this morning is to just give some context around what are we learning so far about the impact that COVID-19 has had on the tourism sector, and is to share some research that we have on what has happened up to now. I think we're being asked a lot of questions around what do we see the impact has been, what do we project it's going to be into the future, and it's only now that March has passed that we're starting to receive some statistics on what is happening in the economy. I think we all know anecdotally that this pandemic has had a significant negative impact on the tourism industry. So it's to try and support it with some statistics and looking forward on how we see a possible recovery plan. And now the presentation will not move. Sorry, I'm having some technical issues here.
Bernadette, if you can just stop your screen share, I'll screen your presentation and just tell me when to pass through.
Okay, if you can, have you got it there?
I've got it ready. Just stop your screen share and then I'll project for you.
I've done that. Thank you. Okay, let's get going again. Could we just go to the next slide, please? So this slide is a summary of what was on the previous slide, and it just shows the extent and the complexities of the tourism value chain. Any block that you see here is impacted by the pandemic, and I don't believe that there's a single part of the value chain that has escaped the impact of the pandemic. This diagram is taken from the UNWTO, so we could tweak it a little bit just to refine it and make it a little bit more relevant to the South African case. But essentially, the whole industry is represented here. And I think what it shows is just how complex this industry is. And at one touch point, if you have no visitors, for example, staying in hotels, then it affects the entire value chain that links into hotels, whether it is food and beverage, whether it's transport, etc. So, trying to also model the impact on the tourism value chain is quite difficult because it is such a complex sector. And anyone who looks at our sector codes will see that tourism doesn't sit as an independent sector code because it is so complex. Can we move on to the next slide? So what is the World Tourism Organization saying about what's going to happen to global tourism? So at the moment, they are projecting that global tourism, that's international tourist arrivals, will decline by between 20 and 30% in 2020. This is way more significant than anything we've ever experienced. If you look back on this graph, all the way back to the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, tourism declined by 4% globally. When the SARS pandemic occurred, tourism declined by minus 0.4%. So this, again, to use that word, is unprecedented decline in tourist movements for 2020. At the moment, the WTO is using a range of 20 to 30%, which is equivalent to 290 to 440 million international tourist movements. And this is obviously a moving target. I would imagine that as we understand the pandemic and as our countries start issuing more travel advisories and responding to the pandemic, we will probably see the WTO refining and adjusting these projections. And it's only at the end of the year that we'll really get a good handle on how tourism has not performed, unfortunately, in 2020. And I haven't seen projections going forward from the WTO beyond 2020. So this is the information that we have for now. Next slide. What I'd like to just share with you now is some research that we have been able to obtain for eThekwini municipality. So eThekwini municipality runs a large-scale tourism research study. We have data for the last 5 years that we can track the performance of tourism, and we've just received the statistics for March 2020, and that's obviously when the pandemic and the lockdown started to really hit South Africa. But there was obviously some lead up to this and a decline in tourism leading up to March, but for us, the lockdown is really the point that we're looking at. And the research that has come out is just how drastic the impact has been. So even though we were operating during March, there was some time where we were operating before the lockdown, accommodation occupancies across eThekwini municipality, this is all establishment types, decreased from what was 70% in March of 2019 to 46% in March of 2020. You know, what we had expected was that tourism performance before COVID, we would have expected March 2020 to be quite similar to March 2019. We were of the view that we were going to have quite a good year. So we've essentially halved occupancies, well, a little bit less than that. Total visitor numbers for March 2020 declined by 36% compared to March 2019, and direct tourism spend by 500 million rand. That's R500 million in lost direct spend. So you can just imagine the impact that that has on the rest of the tourism economy. We can see from the occupancies in March that some types of establishments were worse off than others. So for B&Bs, for example, in March 2019, their occupancies were sitting at about 61%, and in March 2020, they declined to 29%. And it was also just as bad for guest houses. So in 2019, they were sitting at 53%, and in March 2020, their occupancies also declined to 29%. So this is being felt across the sector. What we saw was a decline in visitor arrivals. This is total visitors, including day visitors, of 36%, but overnight arrivals decreased by about 44%, so essentially halving. Some projections have been done on what might happen in the next couple of months. So we've been able to look at what happens possibly till the end of May. And if we're comparing it with what happened last year for March to May, there's a projection that eThekwini will lose about 845,000 visitors by the end of May. It's a little bit too early to do projections beyond May. Those haven't been done yet, but I think the city will be working towards updating these as time goes on. So that basically translates into a loss of direct tourism spend of 2.4 billion rand and a GDP contribution of 4.1 billion rand. So everything and everyone connected to the tourism sector is going to be suffering, and it's going to have a long-lasting negative impact on our tourism industry. And you can see when that's translated into employment opportunities, this is lost employment opportunities in eThekwini. It doesn't reflect the situation in the rest of the province or the rest of the country. It's purely for this municipality. And we know from the research that there's been significant booking cancellations going forward, and that's obviously the biggest concern, and that will continue for as long as the restrictions on travel continue. If we can just also quickly mention for the access statistics, we know that airport arrivals decreased by 42% overall in March of 2020 compared to March of 2019. So there's very strong evidence of how negative this pandemic has been. We can go on to the next slide, thanks. In the survey that was done of accommodation establishments in eThekwini, and we can supplement this with information that we've also seen from other webinars and information that other tourism associations are putting out, Stats SA, etc. People are very concerned about future bookings. Obviously, that makes sense. If you're running a tourism business, you need people to run that business. You need the visitors, you need the guests, the users of your facilities. And so there's huge concern about future bookings. And I guess the uncertainty around when those bookings might return. And with most bookings being cancelled, most places are sitting empty for the long term. And financial sustainability is a key concern, especially in the short term. Businesses are concerned about access to liquidity and also about being able to pay their staff. We've received many pleas, many comments from the industry just saying, how am I going to survive? How do I pay my staff? I'm really concerned about my employees. And how do I keep this business going for the duration of the lockdown and beyond? So that is a key issue. And right now, many businesses are in survival mode. We asked them a question around what assistance they are seeking. And I think, again, this is supported by what else is being said in the industry in terms of what people are looking for. It's the tourism relief funding. We know there are some challenges with accessing that tourism relief funding. I think it came out quite clearly in the SAT webinar with the Minister of Tourism yesterday that there's a lot of frustration around accessing this funding. But people are looking for relief beyond what the tourism relief fund that's actually being put together. They're looking for reductions in municipal charges, so either huge discounts on utilities or rates, holidays, payment holidays, anything that municipalities can offer to try and relieve some of that financial burden on their cash flow. And then looking long-term, businesses are looking for advertising and destination marketing assistance. Clearly, if your revenue has declined, you're going to have less money available for spending on marketing. And so they're looking for assistance, especially from government, provincial authorities, local tourism authorities, to actually, once tourism starts recovering and once we're getting prepared for tourists to come back, to start marketing our destinations and our products again. Next slide. I guess also just to add to that, the most important thing that the industry is looking for is for the businesses to open again. Unfortunately, as I said in the beginning, we don't know what the timing of the recovery is. There's so much uncertainty, and I guess that's what makes this so difficult, is actually trying to understand and get an idea of when things might start changing for the better. As a panel, we've discussed what is the likely order of recovery, and I would say this is supported a lot by what we've been seeing in the industry. It came across quite clearly, I think, in the comments on the webinar yesterday with the Minister of Tourism. We would first see a recovery in local resident travel, because that will be the first bit of restrictions that will be lifted. So we're expecting to see local residents traveling close to home, focusing on socializing and recreational activities, but obviously taking social distancing into account. We would then see intra-provincial travel followed by inter-provincial travel, again in line with how the restrictions have been spelled out. We're not allowed to travel between provinces, so we would expect intra-provincial to recover first, followed then by Africa and overseas. Next slide. So we've tried to put some timing on this and some trajectory. So obviously different market segments are going to recover at different times and different rates. So we would see leisure, business, and MICE or conferencing recovering at different stages, different rates. I would say that this particular diagram will be refined and adjusted as we learn more about the pandemic and its impact on the industry. What we see in the shaded area around the end of the South African lockdown, whenever that might be, we don't know, is probably a spike in domestic leisure travel. That would be to satisfy the pent-up demand from everybody being stuck at home and wanting to just get out, have some freedom, visit friends and family that we haven't been able to see for the last 30-something days and beyond. And then only once the global lockdown ends will we see greater recovery. But you can already see that if you look at that graph, normal is at the top as a dotted line, and 2019 is a dotted line just below that. So what it's showing is that 2020 is way below the performance of what we would consider normal. So that's with the domestic market. And then the last slide I'm going to take you through, if you can swap for me, please, is the foreign market. Based on what the Minister of Tourism said yesterday in terms of international tourism not returning to South Africa before December, perhaps not for the rest of 2020, those lines would probably be adjusted downwards for the block that looks at the end of the South African lockdown. But we're not expecting to see any kind of recovery until the global lockdown has ended, until we start seeing access to a vaccine. And so we need to monitor travel advisories very carefully to see what's happening in our markets and how we can then respond as South Africans. But it's going to be possibly until the end of 2021 and beyond before we see any kind of recovery in those markets. And yesterday I was looking at a document that was talking about specific other segments such as cruise tourism, possibly taking 10 years to recover. So the sentiment out there is very negative, unfortunately. So that's the context. And I'm going to hand over to the next panelist to take you through the recovery plan that we've done over the last few days. It's literally been a few days of trying to come up with how do we respond, or how can we start responding as the industry to this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Bernadine, for that presentation. I think it sort of gives us an interesting picture as to the sector and what we are really anticipating. And these are just preliminary figures, as you've indicated. These are mostly for eThekwini, and I know the Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, together with Tourism KwaZulu-Natal, are currently doing a industry-wide survey within the province so that we have a bigger picture and a great understanding of the impact of tourism and the impact of COVID on tourism within the whole province. So that's going to be interesting. So it just gets to show that these numbers will definitely go up. There's also support industries that obviously come into play as well. The craft sector, the curio shops and all that. All those are also impacted quite negatively by this. And I think just picking up from your last comments, recovery will be quite slow. And interesting that the cruise tourism, you said possibly 10 years for it to recover. So it's going to be a long road, a steep road to follow. But the question is, are we ready? And are we ready to really take the bull by its horns? Once the economy opens up, a lot of the tour operators, the B&Bs, and the smaller players do not have deep pockets. How do we ensure that they have tools that will ensure that they can get back into the system effectively without really being even more out of pocket? Because the reality is they have not been earning an income in the last few weeks due to cancel bookings, etc. The challenges that you clearly articulated. So those are some of the things that we're going to go deeper into once we get into the Q&A section. Without any further ado, I'll introduce Ms. Sindile Xulu, who will then continue with the presentation to look at potential relief measures. Ms. Sindile. Steve, you'll continue sharing the presentation, please.
Thank you, Neville. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Bernadine, for the preamble. Please allow me to share the context in terms of the process that we followed to get to the draft recovery plan that we will be sharing today. We received a brief to assist with developing the provincial recovery plan. We then went away and workshopped to understand the problem as it was presented to us. We then took a decision that we were going to first review some literature that was already available from different stakeholders. We then agreed that we are going to define key objectives that will guide us in terms of how we approach our recommended interventions. So these objectives are as follows: industry analysis, which Bernadine has shared the current available insight and projections. And we are calling for more work to be done in that area because we are in a very unfamiliar territory and things change day by day. Information dissemination, another key objective. And through one of the interventions that are currently put in place, one of them being Usizo by KZN and the relevant stakeholders, followed by the workforce support, as Benedine has shared just the numbers of the potential jobs that will be lost in the city alone. We are then calling for upskilling for the workforce. And lastly is to look at the industry sustainability through some key proposed interventions, which I will take you through. May I please have the next slide? So after defining the objectives, we needed to then define our own process on how we are going to organize ourselves and put the plan in place. So one was to engage the key relevant stakeholders, which that has been done, followed by developing tangible and realistic solutions, then communicate our thoughts to the decision makers, then today communicate to the industry, which that's what we are currently doing. And then after receiving input and feedback, we are hoping that what we have proposed and including your inputs, it will be implemented. May I please have the next slide? So as per the brief that we received, we had to propose a provincial recovery plan that looks at the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So we struggled to find a definition that we can use comfortably in the current situation. We then did our own definition. So short term, we called it the hibernation period, which looks at before the tourism industry is fully allowed to open. Then midterm, we themed it the new normal, which means the sector will be fully operational, but still adversely impacted. And lastly, the long term, which we also themed back to growth, which that will be thriving under new normal. Can I please have the next slide? So the proposed programs and interventions, may I please have the next slide? Have been grouped into various areas, which I will take you through now. And what we then did with each intervention proposed, we then allocated it so that we are specific and it's clear in terms of for what period are we recommending what. We divided that into 3: short term, medium term, long term. And then we also created priority definitions, whether it belongs into, is a high priority, medium or low. So repurposing, we debated many ideas that were on the table, but we then selected and agreed on the following, and those that we are sharing today for your input, review, and contribution. For instance, the immediate opportunity exists for the hotels and accommodation to be utilized for isolation, quarantine, or step-down care and for long stay commuters. Yesterday, the Minister of Tourism, actually it wasn't the Minister of Tourism, but it was Minister Dlamini Zuma, announced that South Africans abroad and permanent residents will now be allowed to return to South Africa. That creates an opportunity because they will be required to be in isolation for 14 days. So there is an immediate opportunity there that could be looked at. One of the other ideas also, we know that the government, especially the Department of Health, is looking at setting up remote triage centers. And we are recommending that the venues, conference venues in particular, could be looked at for such opportunity so that the government does not have to spend money in creating those temporal facilities while there are facilities that could be utilized that are standing empty. May I please have the next slide? Then the next area, we grouped it as adapting and reimagining the market. This is a very difficult time for the sector. There are a lot of stages that one will go through in order to be able to get to a place where you are able to say, okay, how must I survive? How do I adapt? And how do I start reimagining something that is unknown? So we know that it's difficult. And we are only putting recommendations, many recommendations. I am unable to go through each and every intervention that has been recommended because of the nature of how the slide is structured. But I'm going to lead the presentation by defining some of the themes that you will find in each slide. The key thing here, or the theme that comes out, is training and support for the sector to immediately adapt into digital tourism economy, e.g., mobile technology for guest check-in and many other suggestions that are out there, what could be done. One of the things that we are aware of is that the sector employs a lot of women. The craft sector in particular needs immediate assistance in terms of collating their products, putting them online, and assisting in selling these products and access to market. Business retention and expansion is also a key theme for us, focusing mainly for short and medium term on retention, because we see that as the only way that we can protect and do the best that can be done in saving the industry, especially for short term and medium term, and then for long term to then look into the opportunities that will be presented for expansion and growth. Can I please have the next slide? This is a slide that addresses the relief packages that we know that they exist. The government made available some funds, and especially the 200 million that we all know about that is available from National for the tourism sector. we do know that the 200 million is not enough. Even the minister yesterday in the webinar of SA Tourism did acknowledge that it is definitely not enough. We also know that TIKZN, through One Stop Shop, have also created an opportunity for the sector to be assisted through various opportunities that are being assisted to access some of the relief funds. We also know that various stakeholders also have put together a platform that is called and themed Usizo campaign, which means help, that many professionals have contributed their time pro bono to assist the sector with anything that has to do with access to available funds. The colleagues will share more in terms of the contact details at the end, but please utilize those platforms because they've been created for the purposes of such times so that they can be utilized. The key thing here also is that resources are limited. So what needs to happen is that even with what is proposed as a KZN tourism relief fund might not be sufficient by the nature of where we are. But we are recommending that the province receives a fair share from the national purse based on the contribution that the province makes to the GDP, and also to guard against biasness towards Western Cape and Gauteng, for example. May I please have the next slide? So what is done today is definitely about communication. And in times like this, and in any crisis, communication is key. So we recommend that there is a central place created where all information and related information, helpful information, made simple for quick understanding, that it is created. We also recommend that all leaders at all levels, they speak in one voice and with clarity. And we also recommend that the industry is assisted with simplified messages for them to understand the BE Charter and how it impacts the tourism sector. May I please have the next slide? As part of the recommended business retention and expansion program that we are calling for, employee redirection and upskilling is a key deliverable for us as a sector, so that we do the best we can in retaining the workforce that we have. We recommend that the tourism workforce is upskilled for the new normal and the back to growth period. Digital tourism economy is the new opportunity for the sector, and fast adaptation is critical. Hence, a balanced strategy and model for the business retention and expansion program must deal with both retention of business and retention of the workforce. May I please have the next slide? The sector needs to make sure that the KZN tourism recovery plan promotes inclusivity and address economic transformation. The sector also employs a lot of women, and they must not be forgotten only by the sector that they know and love. So the present situation and proposed program can look at opportunities like creating a COVID-19 free zones for restaurants and hotels or other expenses, e.g. taking Florida Road or the beachfront and other experience areas through the province, and then group them into what we will call the COVID-19 the COVID-19 free zones. Yesterday, the minister spoke about developing a de-risking model. We support and agree with the approach, and in our group and in our deliberations, we actually call that wellness clustering model. So we are recommending that we develop a provincial wellness cluster as part of preparing for the new normal and back to growth period. Please allow me to stop here, and then Graham will take the next slides. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for that presentation. Just before Graham comes in, just to indicate that we would also like to acknowledge the presence of our Honorable MEC Mavimbela, MEC for Arts, Culture, Sports and Tourism within the province of KwaZulu-Natal, who has joined us, who will come in to speak immediately after Graham has spoken. MEC will then just seek to bring the understanding from the provincial government into perspective. So just to acknowledge MEC. Thank you so much, Cindy, for this presentation. Quite insightful in terms of the recommendations that have come through. Let me now hand over to Graham to then take us through the next part of the presentation. Graham?
Hello, everybody, and thanks to my fellow panelists, Neville, for their work done so far on this webinar. I'll continue discussing the health and safety issues that we discussed. We were going to talk about distributing guidelines on health and safety standards to be implemented within the tourism industry. The reference to national and associations material that's already distributed out there. I know from a SATSA point of view, we've had extensive meetings and webinars regarding the situation and guidelines as to what your business can do in terms of getting up to the standards in terms of, you know, sanitization, screens up for drivers, that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of material out there, and you know, if you need any more information, please, I'm sure by the end of this webinar we'll give you the relevant details of who to contact. Provide guidance about sourcing of appropriate PPE, similar to what mentioned before. Masks for people that are dealing with lots and lots of tourists, hopefully in the future, and create COVID-free zones such as restaurant and hotel clusters, which we do have international examples of, and Sindile did touch briefly on that earlier. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the sector lobbying, and again, if you look on the right-hand side of these slides, we have you know, most of the situation is considered short-term, meaning immediate intervention needed right away, considering the situation we find ourselves in, and we have also decided, you know, when things need to go into the long term as well, and we've also listed the priorities of what we think what needs to be done. So we're going to include the sector as a standing item for COVID-19 District Command Center agenda. That's particularly been noted. There have been mentions of the tourism industry perhaps not getting as much attention as it deserves. So that was mentioned there. Motivate for support for large, medium, and small industry players are all greatly affected. So whether the business is big, small, or medium, you know, there are still employees that need assistance, whether the business is large, medium, or small. Rental agreements need to be restructured between landlords and tenants. Property industry and banks need to work closely with the hospitality industry. Reverse the negative perception of health safety issues in hotels, restaurant industry. So that comes into finding out what you can do in terms of getting your facilities or activities up to what we consider an international standard in terms of sanitation. Top leadership to motivate national and provincial relief allocations to be proportionally distributed in the province. Review alert levels for restaurant and hospitality. You know, the level 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Many businesses are already well equipped from a hygiene and safety perspective. Work with the private sector to promote fair arrangements for consumers regarding cancellations and refunds, contractual agreements. That is particularly important. Cancellation and refund agreements for facilities that are sort of now April, May, when the country is in lockdown. The next slide, please. So the infrastructure development and tourism investments, complementary tourism asset development in selected strategic nodes and location, provide incentives for investment. And resort developments, gastronomic tourism, Drakensberg cable car, for example, regional airport access, iconic Durban attractions, and the cruise passenger terminal. So develop those while the numbers are low, and we can make a good start on those projects, or a good continuation of those projects. Next slide, please. So the sector analysis. So to gather insights on relevant industry data, including businesses with employees, visitors testing positive, report this information to the relative authorities. You can see short, medium term, and long term, and the priority is high. Industry surveys, what's everybody else doing? How's everybody feeling? Consumer sentiments, find out, internationally, domestically, the same thing. What are people feeling? Tourism value chains and COVID-19 impacts. Monitor tourism advisories in international source market countries. So you've got the FCO in the UK, for example. They've got a Facebook page. I follow it just to see what they are advising. The moment something eases up in South Africa, jump on it. Uptake on various forms of business relief support. Track all visitor movements throughout KZN. Investment monitoring and strategic data analysis regarding which businesses survive and which may not, in order to inform policy. The next slide, please. So promotions, marketing, slide 1. Now this is something that, of course, a lot of it is short term. What can you do now? So we discussed a voucher system for consumers to pre-book at reduced rates. E.g., you pay 2,000 Rand now for a voucher to get 5,000 Rand of credit in the future. That may sound a lot, but get the money in the bank now, secure that future business now while you can. And then the consumer will come back when everything's opened up and take advantage of their credit. And don't forget, for activities and theme parks and that kind of stuff, the entrance fees that are being reduced, the money will get spent within those parks and within those activities as well. So capture the consumer now is the idea there. Promote health and safety, including cleanliness of our cities and towns. Durban's looking pristine at the moment. It's very important to keep it that way. So discuss initiatives when everything is back to normal, how do we keep the streets looking as pristine as they are now? Because that is a very important attraction of Durban, a clean city. Leverage South Africa's leading the charge of COVID-19. We are all extremely proud, I am sure, of the way things are being handled and the relatively low numbers, considering the length of time that we've been struggling with this virus, nearly 2 months now. considering international numbers, we need to be leveraging how South Africa is handling and leading the charge on this. Keep the destinations top of mind, driving desire for travel. If you follow many tourism boards, Facebook pages, and other social media platforms, I'm particularly happy with the constant drive and top of mind that people are keeping the province, Durban, and the country as a whole. Utilize social media platforms to engage and measure, to ensure engagement and measurability. Pay now, stay later for accommodation sector. That's what I touched on earlier. Capture the consumer now for future stays. Concentrate on local domestic market and encourage locals to rediscover their local cities and towns. So I know, for example, in California, the local residents have a subscription pass for the theme parks and attractions there. So it's an annual fee. I don't know, maybe look at something like that for our attractions. Locals get an annual pass so that they keep coming back, keep spending money, and keep driving the economy, because the locals are where it's all going to start. Tourism ambassador drive with locals to instill a culture of ownership so they actively drive tourism in their areas. Creating innovative communications for when markets reopen. Focus on easy, safe, enjoyable, and diversity of offerings. KZN really does have it all. You can go surfing in the morning, go for a game drive later, and then go and cuddle up in a snowy mountain cabin later on that afternoon. It really does have it all. We must be very proud of our province from a tourism point of view. Lobbying citizens to become tourism ambassadors. Most of us have social media platforms on our own. Promote our province, share Durban Tourism and TKZN, for example's posts. Promote. We need to get people back. Campaigns for citizens to become travelers in their own province, touching on majority of what I've said before. Partner with corporates to instill the culture of travel amongst those citizens who might not afford it. Get corporates and airlines to sponsor old people so that they can travel. Leverage pent-up demand for travel, short stays in particular, due to leave income constraints tailored by market. Messaging through media, talking about the merits of the province. This is to include fam trips for media from major markets. So even local people who are promoting the tourism industry, get them out when we can. Host them, show them what you've got to offer. And again, promote, and be proud of your province and city. Next slide, please. Review the value proposition of KZN Tourism. We've touched on that already. You all know, you all work in the tourism industry, of all the wonderful things we've got on offer. So again, it's just all about using everything you can, promote, sell, get people experiencing everything we have. Offer affordable travel package without eroding rates too much. Now that is very important when it comes to talking about future, the voucher system, how much do you discount and all that kind of stuff. Affordable travel packages, but do not erode your rate. Sorry, there's no need to discount completely. You still must be proud of what you're offering, and that must be reflected in the price you charge for it. Harness the full potential of social media and millennials in promoting the positive impact of travel again, particularly in domestic markets. Roadshows and promotional workshop in major markets, domestic, Africa, and overseas. Of course, that's considered a long term. I'm not expecting much to happen before WTM London in November. But that is a high priority. We need to get out there as well and promote the brand. Relaunch the KZN Tourism brand into the market. Hard-hitting marketing campaign as a joint promotion with trade, major tour operators, and airlines to reignite the industry. Our panel is, this forum is here to help get everyone in the same room to do that. Utilize various information officers to run campaigns to encourage travel. Effort should be made to boost off-peak tourism products. This can include campaigns for year-round experiences and events, preparing the sector to adapt their activities and manage tourism flows, and encouraging connectivity within the low season months of the year. We are very lucky in this province, year-round great weather. We need to leverage that with what we are offering. revisit attendance in major trade and consumer shows. A process of strategic targeted selection should be followed in order to select the best trade shows for both leisure and business. You're going to get many invites to attend trade shows. Choose wisely who you're trying to target, where you want to go, how much is it going to cost, return on investment. Look at all of that. Partner up with other people, share tables, that kind of stuff. Incentivize companies to provide holiday vouchers to their staff to boost demand post-crisis, and consider supporting travel and tourism through employee benefits and schemes. A lot of ideas there. So thank you from all of us. Sindile, Bernardine, thank you as well. Thank you to the rest of our team that has worked very hard over the last week or so, 2 weeks, to put all this together for you. And I now hand over to Neville. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Graham, for that insightful presentation, quite detailed, and we really appreciate it. You have really touched on a number of key areas that we need to look at as food for thought. But before we get into a question and answer session, I did acknowledge the presence of our Honorable MEC Mavimbela, MEC for Arts, Culture, Sports and Recreation for the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Let me now request our MEC to say a few words before we then get straight into Q&A session. Honorable MEC, welcome. Please address us. If you can unmute yourself, MEC.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Neville, for allowing me the opportunity, and my apologies once more for joining the meeting late. Technology was testing me. But anyway, the work is continuing. I'm so inspired by the work and the presentation. I joined the meeting while Sindile was doing her presentation. I'm really inspired. I'm happy. It shows there is the way forward. And I've listened to Graham and all what he had presented. Promote, promote, promote. So I think that's what we have to do as the province going forward during this difficult time. Difficult times happens to us so that we overcome it. Our understanding as the provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal is that all the challenges that comes our way, they are equal to our strength. So we are going to face this situation and also make sure that we allow the tourism industry for our people to also continue enjoy, and also to continue make some input for those that are most vulnerable and who are less in terms of getting some income. So I'm hoping with all these plans that have been put forward is going to assist us going forward. I'm really inspired, and I really want to appreciate the efforts of the team in terms of putting together all this work for the provincial government. It shows that there are some dedicated people that would love to see the government doing better in changing the lives of our people. I don't want to waste a lot of your time, especially because I've joined the meeting late. Thank you very much for allowing me just to greet the members of the tourism sector. Thank you very much, Neville.
Thank you, Honorable MEC. Thank you for those kind words, and also inspiring us with a clear direction from the provincial government. This program, for what we have heard, are a number of challenges that are anticipated within the tourism sector. Quite a few questions coming in. Perhaps as a start for Sindile, your presentation was quite detailed in terms of interventions, and I'm glad that some of your interventions have also been a bit cross-cutting in terms of support industries. And I think the arts and crafts sector is a sector that you've touched on. Perhaps if you can go into a little bit more detail as to exactly what the thinking is in supporting, our crafters, who really play an important role in supporting the tourism industry within the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And then the second question is really related to the the issues around the business retention and expansion. It's obvious that as our president has articulated, this is the new normal for us. So it's not business as usual as we would understand it. So with this new normal, you spoke about the wellness cluster. How do you see this wellness cluster really becoming a pillar to assist the tourism industry to come out of the challenges that they are seeking to experience, but specifically focusing under the business retention and expansion, because the retention is one area, the expansion is another area. On the retention side in particular, what is the thinking behind that? So I'll allow you to respond to those questions, and then I'll move on to another panel member. Thank you.
Thank you, Neville. Please allow me also to invite my fellow panelists to assist in unpacking some of these concepts more detail and better than I could. But from the crafts point of view, I saw from the questions a lady by the name of Nati. I hope I assume correct if I think she's a lady, but I think I read the message. One of the ideas was to identify, and we were also trying to see if we could find some existing databases, but where we saw the opportunity was to create a database of the crafters that we are aware of that are positioned or service, in particular the travelers, especially the international travelers, that we then collate their items and of course document them and then put them on a digital platform and assist them in that way, that because there will be less or no travelers actually for quite some time until we are probably at level 1 where domestic travel could resume. We also suggested that with the lockdown and the low time right now, they could also be creating some new crafts that could appeal to the local market and also put together and put on a digital platform, and they get assisted in that manner that they are then sold digitally. In terms of business retention and expansion, we didn't have enough time to get into detail in terms of what do we see as the retention program, because Neville, you are correct that for the short term and medium term, definitely retention, we see it as one of the ways, if not the only way, that we could look at how do we define the program. And of course, with the input from many people as today we are engaging, I saw also people are asking if we are able to share this presentation because it was intended for this exactly, for thought-provoking, for input and for suggestion. So one will need to go away and create and define a strategy and then immediately come with a program that could be rolled out and that could be done in following a systematic way, as we have talked about clustering. And you asked me about the wellness cluster. I will ask my colleague Joe or Russell, I don't know if Russell is here also, to just give us a little more on that one without wasting further time. Joe, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Cindy. Sorry, what was that question you had?
Was to just please unpack the thoughts around the retention program. What could it be, just to give examples? We're asked to give some examples of what our thoughts are.
Yes, hi, everybody. The retention program, I mean, this issue is quite complex. And we recognize that businesses, are not going to be able to operate as normal for quite some time. So we're looking at, one of the slides was on repurposing, finding ways for business to adapt and repurpose. The one example is the use of accommodation facilities and hotels for quarantine, maybe even those who are at high risk in terms of the elderly and those with comorbidities, uh, and trying to keep operations active, even if they have to do other things, so that we can help retain their operations so they still stay afloat for the season where business is not usual. The other was to potentially repurpose employees who are, for example, a lot of tour guides that rely significantly on international tourists won't be um, won't be active for a season, but we don't want to lose those key skills in the industry. So we may need to look at areas where we can repurpose them, which also will help the industries to be sustained in the time and keep the skills base so that they can be repurposed temporarily, either to assist with some of the health needs or other needs, but so that in the future they can come back into the businesses. But
Thank
also
you.
in terms of, sorry?
Sorry, to your last point.
Yeah, in terms of supporting the businesses, we need to find ways to help businesses um, strategically, and look at areas around cash flows, uh, look at certain forms of funding and investments to keep them, enabled to survive and weather the storm.
Thank you very much for that. I think while you're on the platform, the point is that a lot of the, particularly the small to medium-sized tourism, either operators or B&B owners within the province have not been earning an income. And the reality is the bulk of tourism is really their heartbeat. Without that income, now getting back into the space of tourism again, and understanding that it's going to be a slow progression, as Bernardine has really shown us in terms of how it will slowly start improving, and potentially by 2021 to have it almost back to normal. And I say almost underlined because of the presentation that we received from Bernardine. Because they don't have cash, how do they get back into how do we tap into a program that can assist them to ensure that they are ready to, if we were to unpause the button, they'll be ready to really get back into the sector?
Thanks, Neville. So that partly it goes back to the reality is all these other fancy programs we might create won't solve the problem unless businesses do get cash resources. So we are going to lobby strongly for some of the national funds and others to be proportionally allocated locally in the province. But we know, especially in the first rounds of funding that were there, they were significantly insufficient for the needs. But there's going to have to be greater resources, and greater commitments were made in the recent president's announcement. And so we need to find ways of bringing those resources into the hands of the businesses that need them. But also, I think there's going to have to be an element of rationalization, unfortunately, that takes place. And because probably not every business in the tourism industry is going to be able to survive this. Some were already struggling, and some are going to have to, unfortunately, just be allowed to die. But as much as possible, we want to keep the skills base. So, for example, you might have a tourism operator doing cultural tours, and they were struggling to keep afloat. That business might have to die or kind of lay fallow for a season, and reallocate that entrepreneur to support maybe another tourism operation where they can gain skills and maybe even be more effective post this crisis.
Thank you very much for your response. Thank you very much, Joe. I wouldn't advocate for them to actually die. Perhaps we need to look at opportunities for diversification rather than basically looking at other products that these operators, because these are entrepreneurs, And then the second point on the cash, this is where we need to bring in perhaps some of our provincial funding instruments, such as Edtea, to come on board in respect of this, to design a program that can come in. And this is something I would then strongly recommend that it comes out as a resolution from these engagements today. On the business retention, I know it's normally a program that is run between the municipality, the provincial government, as well as the community, including the businesses within the sector, where they go into the community, they look at key areas that are impacting on the specific sector. And out of that, they come up with recommendations, practical recommendations that can ensure the easing of the value chain in order to support the sector within where they are located. Just a question for Graham. Graham, you spoke at length regarding the preparation, and I'm glad you touched on it because I think that's an important question, an important part, specifically dealing with being prepared to get onto your feet. Almost like a toolkit. Are we going to design a toolkit that can be an advice platform for those in the tourism sector to get back onto their feet, which will advise them on sanitization, social distancing, what is required, etc., etc. So can you please just talk through that? Joe, I'd ask if you can please mute your mic. Graham?
Yes, so SATSA, the inbound industry, has already done a lot of research on this, and there is documentation out there. So my suggestion is we don't necessarily invent the wheel with many different organizations doing the same kind of research when it has already been done and market input has already been given. There is recommendations out there already, particularly for transport, accommodation, activities, and a couple of other different sectors as well. So if anybody would like to see that, we can. I'm having a SATSA meeting at 11, so we can just talk about. There is that information out there. It's on. I think it may be on the SATSA website, satsa.com. So SATSA. If anyone wants to go and have a look, a lot of information on the SATSA website. So have a look there.
Great. And then if you can come in, there's two questions that have come through from Claude Pretorius. The one is related to, basically he says Durban and KwaZulu-Natal share relatively low levels of awareness compared to Kruger, Cape Town, and Gauteng, and Vic Falls, etc., etc. If you can respond to that the second question there as well, if you could just touch on that in terms of the international marketing segments. How do you see, because you had a lot of advice on obviously ensuring that we select the right markets. How do you then come in to assist in terms of segmentation of the key platforms that we would strongly encourage our operators to participate in?
I would probably say the best people to speak with would be Tourism KZN. Tuli is online as well, so they would have more expert knowledge of what. I think it's good to work in conjunction with Durban Tourism and Tourism KZN and SATSA as well. We often have joint meetings. Claude himself has been to one of them and presented. So. I think the first port of call, because again, we don't want too many people working over each other and splitting resources doing the same thing. So I think in terms of provincial promotion into the international market, TKZN is doing a lot of work already. So, Tuli, I don't know if you are online and can perhaps put someone's email address on the chat for them to contact. And then, those local activities, and tourism providers can get in touch to see with Durban and Durban Tourism. Roshni and the team there are doing a great job as well. So, and I don't want to discount. I mean, I know I've seen. Hi, Tuli's just said she's online. So, there is the North Coast, the South Coast, the Drakensberg as well, which TKZN encompasses. So, Durban Tourism is doing a great job, but of course, all the other tourism board is the Midlands Meander Association, all of that kind of stuff. But Durban Tourism KZN encompasses the whole province. So I think that would be the best place to start. And then they can advise further on their activities, because they have funding too. Yeah. Neville, you're on mute.
Just one last question for you. Thank you for that. One last question from you, from an anonymous attendee. I don't like anonymouses, but it's fine. It says, what guarantee are there for those people buying vouchers up front for use later? For example, the whole encouragement has been, don't cancel, rather delay or postpone. The question is, will those businesses still be operational?
I can't provide any guarantee on that. It's an idea for properties and excursions to give, to secure future business, and it's up to the consumer to decide whether they want to take that risk, I would say. Perfect. Honorable MEC, there is a question that has been put up for you from Cindy Letamini. The question, MEC, is event organizers contribute to a lot in the tourism sector. How is KwaZulu-Natal government assisting them during this hard period, particularly, I suppose, during, as soon as lockdown is lifted? MEC?
Thanks, Neville, and also thanks to the question that is raised to the provincial government in terms of how are we assisting the event organizers during this time. There are a number of relief activities that the government have provided. In terms of the small business, there's also the package for those that are said to be SMMEs. Not only the SMMEs, but the number of those people that are providing business. So I think with the link, I think the caller that is using is also going to follow it. With you, the TKZN will also assist in terms of how are they being assisted, because those event organizers were benefiting from the different events. Some of the events were not exactly from the Edtea side or from any other business side. Let me make an example. We are having some events. The athletics, it's an event, Comrades Marathon. There are some beneficiaries that are no longer going to get those benefits. And they have to present their case in terms of how do they lose because of this COVID-19. But having said that, all of us must having an understanding that it's no one invited COVID-19. That's why we are having these platforms, so that we engage with all those that are affected in finding the solutions, and those solutions that will be best for all of us in addressing the economy of our province. I was going to say, Neville, the tourism industry is affected, and the aftermath is going to be with us for a while. So that's why we are having such platforms, so that we also put in place some plans going forward in terms of catering for those. But in short, let them apply through the SMMEs. They have to display how they lost, and they can be assisted in terms of that. As much as they are not going to get the 100%, as they were supposed to get 100% if the event was hosted, but there will be a relief of some kind. So that is the only thing that I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MEC. Bernadine, if you can come in, perhaps just to talk a little bit more about training and development in order to support the the tourism sector post-COVID. And also, if you can also just respond, there is a question that came from Belinda Dupree from Margate, who was asking, what support is there for small B&Bs to get access to sanitizers, etc. As I've mentioned earlier, a lot of them have been making money the last couple of weeks, and with cash having run out, how do is there a platform where they can perhaps get some form of assistance in perhaps a kickstart? Bernadine, are you with us?
Yeah, sorry, Neville, you broke up towards the end, but I did see the question on the Q&A. If I can just talk to that first. I think her question was around, will they be supplied with these kinds of PPEs or hand sanitizers, etc. We actually spoke about this as a panel yesterday when we were finishing off this plan and talked about, how do we give people access to this material? And I suppose if you're also running a business where you're not generating any revenue, how do you afford to provide that for when your market does return? So it's a very difficult thing to deal with. What we had said in the recovery plan was that we need to give people access to information about where they can find the necessary supplies that they need. And I guess it's a question of shopping around a little bit as well to make sure that you're getting good quality, but also affordable products for your business. I'm not aware of government saying that they will be providing businesses with all of these supplies. So I can't really answer that part of it. I think that someone from the public sector would be better placed to answer that part of the question. And then on training and development, what aspect of that would you like me to just cover? I'm not a training and development specialist, but maybe if you can just clarify a little bit of what you're looking for there.
Yeah, thank you. One of the recommendations that has come up from the team is focusing on training and development. If perhaps you're not the specialist, if maybe Cindy Le or Graham can address that. But one of the recommendations that has come out of your presentation is focusing on training and development. Perhaps if you can talk a little bit more about that.
I mean, I can weigh in. So with the, yeah, I mean, training and development, there are, again, various different programs out there that are being offered. And I would say that as Bernadine said, someone from the public sector would be able to probably answer a bit more. It just depends on the certain needs. There are various companies out there, private companies that offer training. In terms of upskilling as well, I would say that the companies own the staff as well. So while everybody's on a bit of a lull, talk about what they do. If you've got chefs, if you've got waiters, if you've got anybody, just as the business owner, research what information you want them to know, what research is out there. There's online platforms such as TED Talks that are free. There's various different YouTube videos out there that'll speak to your specific needs and industry. Advise your staff to go and research as much as they can. The internet is an amazing tool. So it doesn't need to be formal institutions that do training and development. The business owner should say, what do I want my staff to get better at? And when we rise up again, and focus on that. And if they need any kind of funding for training, or if they've identified anything that costs them, then I would approach something from a national government level to see if there is funding available for that. But I would say the business owner, it's up to them to formulate the plan of what they want to do, what they want to upskill their staff with, what knowledge, seek out where that knowledge can be found online or with the help of their local tourism KZN as well. They as I say, the great place to start. and do it from there. But identifying the need first is identifying what is needed, because I mean, you know, there's DMCs, there's excursions, there's transport operators, maybe. I mean, I don't know. There's so many different specifics that need to be looked into when it comes to training and development of what each of the thousands of companies would need, particularly for their own staff. So I would say it's up to the owner to decide, what do we want to do, how we want to use this time of not being as busy as we would like, and rise up and be even better at our jobs than we were when we eventually get back to work.
Thank you so much, Graham, for that response. Graham, just one final question from me to you. You spoke a lot about rediscovering our platforms, like rediscover KZN, you know, or rediscover Belito, or rediscover Josini, you know. In respect to those, how would you recommend the level of coordination at a provincial level, but not only provincial? So if we could also not just look at government for solutions, but from an industry perspective, how can the industry prepare itself to help itself to recover and to get out of this pandemic challenge?
I think if we're going to focus on preparation, as I mentioned earlier, it's about promote, and promote again. You know, tell people what you've got on offer, and yeah, just focus on what you've got, and promote it. That's the best, the sort of most simplistic advice I can give. You know, you don't need sort of a centralized forum to do that for you. You know, with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, which can reach thousands of people. You know, we've heard many situations where things go viral. Think about if you run a restaurant, maybe get your chefs or get your staff to cook a meal from home of one of your dishes on your menu. You know, it's little things like that, and just put it online. I mean, who knows? That's the kind of stuff that we were thinking. And you know, if your hotel or lodge offers a specific you know, unique selling point that you're particularly proud of, you know, again, I'll refer back to a food choice, but it could be anything. If you make an awesome eggs Benedict or something, just put it out there. Get people to know your business, and if you offer a specific niche cultural experience, you know, get it out there. If you have videos of people that you've taken, just now's the time to create Facebook pages, Twitter feeds, all that kind of stuff. Get the followers. We will gladly assist you in following and liking and all that kind of stuff. You know, again, the tourism bodies would be the best people to speak to in terms of retweeting and reposting and all that kind of stuff, because they would be able to assist there. They have the reach. But it doesn't necessarily have to cost any money, is what I'm saying. You know, I did it myself. My family and I baked rusks the other day, and we sent it off to a client in America, who then promoted it to say, you know, come to South Africa and what. So it doesn't, when you talk about promotion and marketing, you don't need to get scared about the cost, because there's lots of free platforms that you can do, and it's all about just being creative within your own mind. You know what you've got, you know what to market. Nobody can tell you how to create something that is going to show off what you have. You know, it involves a bit of self sort of thinking as well as to what you can do. And if you need advice on what platforms to go on, you know, lots of people may not be as tech savvy as others. I would say that Tourism KZN and anybody in this platform as well, the MEC's department and stuff would be able to assist anybody in what they can do. You know, I think we live streaming on Facebook now, we live streaming on YouTube. It's that kind of stuff. Think about what you think people will be interested in watching. and just show them.
Thank you, Graham. Last words. I'll start with Joe.
Yes, hello. Yeah, my last words is we're in for a very tough time ahead. The tourism industry is critical to KZN's economy and South Africa's economy, and we need to do all that we can, both as players in the tourism industry, as government and business bodies, etc., to support businesses in this time and find creative solutions to keep them surviving, so that down the road they can thrive. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bernardine. Joe, Bernardine, any final words from your side?
Maybe what struck me during this pandemic is how government and private sector have come together to actually work and collaborate together on finding solutions. And just in trying to understand what the problem is that we're facing. You know, we're all in the same situation here, public sector, private sector. And so I think we can use this as an opportunity to find new ways for government departments and government entities to work collaboratively and together, as well as with the private sector. In many dealings that we have with the private sector, people sometimes say, but I can't talk to government. I need to work with government. How do I access them? And I think we can use this as an opportunity to find ways so that can find solutions together, because if we all work in our individual silos, we will not find the best solutions to how we actually work through this pandemic. And then maybe just something else that I've been thinking about in dealing with industry stakeholders is there's a lot of uncertainty, frustration, and even depression in the industry at the moment. People are starting to lose hope. I get the sense of that in some areas. And so we also need to think practically about how do we support the industry and our staff and the people, maybe from a mental health point of view. And this is becoming quite a critical issue, so that when we get through this, we are optimistic and we have hope, and we can actually move into the future and get this industry going again. Thanks.
Thank you, Bernardine. Sindile, final words from your side.
Thank you, Neville. Bernardine has actually captured it very well. I share the same sentiments with Bernardine. The industry is definitely affected. We don't know any better, but we have put the best forward in the limited time that we had. And I am glad that I'm seeing from the Q&A people asking and requesting that if the draft presentation can be shared with them. And that makes me quite hopeful that what we put forward, the sector is welcoming it and willing to engage with it. Collaboration, empathy, communication, collaboration in times like this. As South Africans, we can hold one another in the sector. This is not the time to show off and to be selfish, but this is the time for us to be united as a sector, communicate, use this experience of collaboration, of consulting, of involving and engaging everybody to try and find the solution. We are all dealing with something that we don't know, but definitely I share very strongly with what Bernardine has said, because even for us, when we were working on the plan, it was quite difficult because you can never imagine something that you are not in. So to try and put forward a proposed recovery plan for the sector, you ask yourself, why me? Why not others? But we've put our best foot forward, and we hope that the industry will receive this with the great intent that it's been meant for, that they will be able to engage with it and pick what they think could work for them. That's why we put so much detail there and so many ideas, with the hope that someone can take one and it could make a small difference. Thank you very much, Neville. And thank you, panelists. And thank you, colleagues, for all the contributions.
Thank you so much, Sindile. And I must take this opportunity to thank you, panel members, for participating and putting together this solid platform. Just one question that I saw coming in, we'll try and answer it outside this platform regarding claims with insurance companies. We'll try and respond to that outside this platform. Just to, coming to the end, we'd like now our Honorable MEC just to say final words, and then I will close. MEC?
Thank you very much, Neville, for the deliberations from the panelists and from all the members. We really rely on your expertise as the team in terms of dealing with the situation at hand as the government of KwaZulu-Natal. I think some of the closing words by Sindile were saying this pandemic have bring together the sense of Ubuntu. So from this pandemic, there is something that we have learned, that we need not to work in silos. The private sector, the government, really, we need that collaboration so that we will achieve one goal. And one goal is to see ourselves after this pandemic being the sector that is addressing some of the issues. And we have to start now in addressing some of the challenges that we are faced with the sector, and making sure that we are addressing some of the challenges for the better of the lives of our people. Because what must come to the center is the life of those that cannot do anything. I understand as the sector, we are looking at the tourism, but we must also take into cognizance that there are people that are working in the tourism sector that are not direct beneficiaries of the economy that we are creating as the sector, and those that are also affected. As I've said in my first words, or in my opening remarks, that the sector is affected and the aftermath will also stay with us for a while. But these plans that are put in place really are assisting in terms of going forward and paving the way of how are we dealing with the situation while we are still in the pandemic and after the pandemic. So we really appreciate the work that the technocrats they are doing in terms of putting together all that they have put together. I think is assisting us as the provincial government. And I really want to appreciate the work that they are doing in their tight schedule and in their busy, tight schedule and under this difficult time. Because the situation that we are in really is traumatizing. All of us, we are traumatized, but they are working an extra mile in terms of putting together such a presentation that can also be thought-provoking, because some of our respondents, they were responding because there is something that was put before them, then it just provoke some of the thinking, and is also assisting us as the provincial government in terms of paving the way going forward. I think, Neville, in your closing remarks, you will share the contact details for the TKZN for those that want to be assisted in terms of how do they boost their business as in your other capacity as the CEO of the TKZN. Our words cannot be enough in terms of thanking you, good people, with your expertise, with your skills, and we appreciate it, and keep on supporting us. We really need each other to go this mile. It's not an easy one. We never predicted it. We never think about it. but with all the skills, the capacities that you are having, we are at your disposal to be advised as the politicians, so that whatever decisions that we are taking, we are informed and we are doing it correctly in terms of taking into cognizance our people that are really vulnerable. Thank you very much, Neville.
Thank you, MEC, for those words. Just in conclusion, and as MEC has directed, I will share with you the, the details. If you go on the website, www.tikzn.co.za, that's our website. And then you will notice on the side, bottom left, the face of the MEC, where we are going to be uploading the presentations for these webinars. So if you just click on that, it should be able to take you through to some of the presentations of some of the sessions that have been taking place. Those are the ones that have been taking place, and all the presentations. For example, we had the one for finance, the presentations are loaded there. If you'll just bear with us, it'll take us perhaps a day or two just to make sure that this is all the presentations are loaded, because we've got back-to-back webinars today. After this one, we'll be going straight to our trade and investment one, which starts at 10:30, which will be also quite thought-provoking, and then followed by industrial development, as well as a property sector. So 3 additional webinars that will be taking place today. For the panel members, thank you very much for your time, for your input, and I'm quite sure that there will be a follow-up session that will be hosted on these platforms. I'd like to thank the team, Steve, as well as Dennis in the background, that have been assisting us to put together this platform, as well as the department from the team from the Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and Honorable MEC, thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for being with us this morning. This brings us to the close of the webinar.